Welcome in. It is Pro Football Today, right here on SportsGrid. I'm Kevin Walsh, joined, of course, by Donnie Rightside and Joe Lisi for what looks to be one of the best slates of this season. No more bye weeks to deal with.
Beautiful.
And it has absolutely loaded us up here. Detroit and Buffalo with a huge battle between two of the best teams in the National Football League. The Pennsylvania showdown with Pittsburgh going to Philly. And there's plenty more to sink our teeth into, Joe.
There is. In that battle tonight, Green Bay and Seattle, a battle for playoff position. Can Jordan Love and the Packers get off the mat? They lost their last game to Detroit. But these games at 4 o'clock, Kev, I mean, those are the ones that I'm really looking forward to. 1 o'clock slate really wets the palate, Donnie.
Yeah.
We'll see Kansas City if they can get the victory. Bad weather in the forecast in Cleveland. We see Baltimore and New York squaring off. Huge favorite. And New York, Jets and Jaguars, pretty good game in terms of the total perspective. We'll see how it plays out.
It's really nice to see, though, that we do have an absolute full slate at this time, because sometimes you say, 6-7 teams out, maybe the slate's a little bit thin. You are chock full of everything. And there are a lot of games that don't mean anything, but also many games that mean a lot. When we're talking about those 425 games, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, Buffalo and Detroit, it doesn't get any better. You're looking at teams fighting for the top spots overall in their conference, and also one game in a dome, high number, one game outside, cooler temperatures in Philadelphia. Should be a fun one to watch, but also Miami, Houston, a lot there. Are you going to stay up top of that division here for Houston? And also, if you are Miami, what are you going to do with your shot here with a chance to climb into the playoffs? And one more game I want to pick out, which I do expect Cincinnati to win. Can they just get hot at the right time with that offense and maybe sneak in the back door? We'll find out, but I like the slate today. It's a lot of fun.
I'll tell you, in terms of the back door with that AFC postseason picture, the Miami Dolphins would love to get in the mix as well. A team like Miami, a team like Cincinnati, yes, you need to handle your business. You might need a little bit of help. You could argue that the game between the Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts is the most important game on this slate for what it means with that AFC postseason picture. A win for Denver, and it likely buries the Colts and probably puts this Broncos team a win away from securing what you would think would be a spot in the AFC's postseason picture. But both are off by, so it is all to play for. You look at the game between Detroit and Buffalo, certainly a relevant one when we talk about seeding. The Bills, I think, have to win out if they're going to get the number 1 seed in the AFC. I also wonder if Detroit wins this game, booked as a favorite, Lisi, what it could do to Josh Allen as the MVP favorite. We've seen record matter so much. Josh last week in a loss was fine. All it took was one of the greatest quarterback games you've ever seen, 6 total scores, 450 yards of offense. Okay, if he does that every time they lose, he'll be fine. It's an interesting spot.
It really is, and they've won 7 of the last 8, Kev. They were a hot football team heading into L.A., and they just got beat by, at that particular time, a better offense in terms of Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. They just outscored Buffalo last weekend. But again, now they go on the road, and they're facing the hottest team in the NFL right now in terms of the Detroit Lions that have won 11 straight games. They're a dominant home team, Donnie. Only 1 home loss on the regular season, and they've won their margin. The first 9 games in terms of the winning streak, Detroit has won by an average margin of 19.4 points per game. Last 2 games against the Pack and Chicago, they've won those by a total of 6 points. So that's why you're seeing a tight number, 2.5. We'll see how it plays out at 4 o'clock.
It sort of messes with my mind a little bit, because you're looking at usually you say to yourself, like, hey, little off performance, looking for a bounce back. He had 6 total touchdowns. They lost the football game. So I understand with the thought process behind a handicapper going, like, you know what? If they would have won last week, maybe it's one of those games where they technically don't need as much, which you can't lose 2 games in a row. And even if Philadelphia loses today to Pittsburgh, then you're looking at the Buffalo Bills not even vying for the 1 seed. They'd now turn into the 3 seed. So a lot of things that have to happen in order to make it work. But I love the way Josh Allen played. And quite frankly, is he going to have at least a 5 combined touchdown performance today for them to keep in it?
Well, it's possible. Man. I mean, we'll see how that game plays out. But again, when you think about Detroit, we saw Caleb Williams have success, Kevin, Jordan Love as well. So that would have to be the MO for Buffalo, maybe challenge that defense over the top.
We mentioned at 4 o'clock, though, it is a jam-packed slate there. The game between the Eagles and Steelers have a few headlines, but none bigger than Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, what that will look like. And, again, that to me is why the A.J. Brown stuff bothers me as much as it did. Saquon Barkley is on track to break the rushing record. We just talked about Josh Allen's MVP case. The big challenger would be Saquon Barkley. Yet we have to sit here on this desk and figure out, will A.J. Brown get the ball enough to his liking, regardless win or lose? Otherwise, then he'll throw Jalen Hurts back under the bus. I maintain it's one of the most selfish things I've ever seen in my entire life for this team to be on this level of win streak. And mind you, A.J. Brown is not having the season that Deebo Samuel is having. Not one bit. A.J. Brown is averaging well over 80 yards per game. A.J. Brown not having a 1,000-yard season is because A.J. Brown has not been healthy so far this season. He is well on pace for that, Donnie, but not enough touchdowns apparently. Didn't like Devonta Smith scoring in his first game back, so all of a sudden it becomes me.
And also the plays that you saw, the touchdown passes, which again, Jalen threw 2 touchdown passes last week. One had a streaking over-the-middle slant pass to a wide-open A.J. Brown. Goes, now, you know what? I'm going to throw the out route there to Devonta Smith, and he got that one. The second one you saw also him streaking just behind Calcaterra. Calcaterra got that pass for a touchdown. Calcaterra celebrated with Saquon Barkley in the back of the end zone. As A.J. Brown walked off, was like, you guys have the celebration. I'm headed back to the sideline. I love wide receivers that want the football, and he does, but you're right about it. It's interesting. Like, if you would have lost 3 straight games, I'm not getting the football. A little bit more merited. The fact that they're winning football games and he's angry, I actually like it even more at this point because it shows how maniac this guy can actually be. But today, I do think he's going to get force-fed the football. What did we see last week, guys? Deebo Samuel immediately get the first pass. I can almost guarantee you that same pass call is going to happen today for the Philadelphia Eagles. Play-action pass, slant to A.J. Brown, see what he's got early on. You happy, kids?
Yeah, can we bet targets today? 15 targets?
Honestly, I'd take down. If I'm Hurts, I'd ice him out.
Right.
Now, see, that's the villain I would like to see.
But I do want to bring up the fact, the timing of it. Kev, the timing of A.J. Brown coming out. And knowing that this team was 10-1 last year and went 1-5 the second half of the season, why do you want to disrupt the continuity when you're on a 9-game winning streak?
Because all that matters is A.J. Brown.
Well, that's
No, I think by the way, Jalen Hurts, ask anyone who's backed the Eagles, bet the Eagles, or fan of the Eagles, big turnover problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Eagles are now run heavy, and guess what? Hurts been playing clean football. All right, great. So now he can chuck the ball down the field without any care in the world, get picked off, and A.J. can complain about it. It's, again, just an unreal level of selfishness out of there that really, really just still does not sit right with me. On our show today, there are also some storylines that blend the college and pro world together, including, of course, Bill Belichick going to North Carolina, something we talked about plenty on college football today. But DRS, I know you have a lot of thoughts on as well. I ask you, though, from the NFL angle, the fact that Bill Belichick is in college says what to you?
It says he's getting frozen out from the NFL owners that obviously have it out against him, and sometimes rightfully so. And understand this. New England Patriots, one of the cheatingest organizations we've seen over the past 20 years and the most dominant, which, again, is going to make teams angry, like the Deflategate scenarios, the taping on the sideline, it never ends. And also keep in mind, Bill Belichick is a few wins away from knocking off Don Shula as the number 1 overall, game winner in NFL history as a head coach. They're not going to let him get there at this point. I think that's interesting. I do think there is something to Bill Belichick downgrading into college football, just from a perspective standpoint, because he loves to teach the game, and those kids are much more moldable than once you actually get to the professional ranks. I think it's an interesting move. If it works out, could change the tide, Joe.
It can. I think he'll be very successful on the college level. We talked about that yesterday in terms of what he brings, preparation and development of young players. But from the NFL side, Kev, it's clear that maybe he was shut out, that organizations didn't want to buy in. Maybe the age was a factor, and the factor of, just dealing with him over the past, 20 years.
Again, ultimately, I think it worked out for him. I think a lot of coaches should consider the college game over the pro game. You also, last night, saw Travis Hunter win the Heisman Trophy. The two-way superstar now has a bowl game left against BYU, and then we try and figure out, will he go first overall? Will he play DB? Will he play wide receiver? Will he play both? But before any of that, we go to Detroit next. I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a challenge. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set, to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this, I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text, put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. When he texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Here on Pro Football Today, where one of the best games of the season potentially awaits. In Detroit, the Lions. The, mind you, red-hot Detroit Lions. We were talking a little during the break. Not discuss the win streak that is going on in Detroit, because they've basically been winning all of the games. We focus on the record, the price, but this team has won 11 games in a row. It makes the Eagles' 9-game win streak look minuscule, or the fact that within their division you've got Minnesota, who's won 6 straight and hasn't picked up a game the entire time of that winning streak. The Lions, though, are under a field goal favorite at home, with the Buffalo Bills coming into their building, who had themselves quite the win streak, but snapped last week in the loss to the Rams. So you have this 2.5-point spread, and you have a total sitting big time, no doubt, at 54.5. It's a tricky game. It is one where it feels like, Buffalo really needs it. Buffalo going to lose 2 games in a row. Well, we've seen Buffalo lose 2 games in a row this year because they had back-to-back road games against the Ravens and the Texans, 2 teams above 500. The Buffalo Bills are winless this season on the road against teams above 500. And now they're playing the team with the best record in football. Look, I'm not trying to disrespect the Buffalo Bills, but there's no way I don't bet the Detroit Lions under a field goal at home, Donnie, in this spot.
No, you're absolutely right about that, because sometimes we look as handicappers, Kevin, like, what are we missing from this one? Like, what's the situation and why doesn't this make sense? Because I look at the 2.5, which it opened up, still sits at 2.5 right now. I look at the ticket count, roughly 7 out of 10 tickets coming on the Buffalo Bills. And again, spot might be decent for the Bills, but understand this, and I get it. The quarterback position, Joe, best in the NFL just might be Josh Allen.
Yep.
But if you look at running back, it's Detroit.
Yep.
Offensive line, it's Detroit. Overall defensive measures, it's Detroit, and they're home, and it's under a field goal, Joe. Help me with this.
Yeah, well, when you think about Detroit and how they play games, they're built to go explosive, high, up-tempo type of games where they put up 50 points, or they're built to go lower scoring, run the football, be more methodical, and work off the defense. So They are built as a full team, and that's the one thing when you look at them right now, they could go either way depending upon how Josh Allen and the Buffalo offense go. I will say the last game that they did play against Green Bay, we saw Josh Jacobs have success on the ground. I expect James Cook, in terms of this matchup, to have success. 49.5 is his prop. I think Buffalo takes a different type of approach. They want to maybe sustain drives a little bit more because look at what L.A. did to them. They jumped up early. They felt that they could go toe-to-toe from an offensive perspective. They won the turnover battle. They got the blocked kick in terms of the punt block, and that changed the whole complexity of the first half. And Josh Allen was faced in terms of a catch-up type of situation. Yeah. I don't think that's the case today. I think they try to run the football and then put the pressure on Jared Goff. Now, I do feel that St. Brown, though, has a big day today. Right. 70.5 is his prop. I like Buffalo, though, because of their ability to run the football. I think that's where it gets done.
I think the Detroit rush defense has stepped up a number of times throughout the season. We'll see if they can do it again. Josh last week used his legs a ton, as much as he really has all season long in that loss to the LA Rams. I think what's interesting is in that game for Buffalo, when you play as appealing of a game, right, as Buffalo did last week, it's not all that concerning. Again, like, the Bills lost last week, and is Josh the best quarterback in football? And just to make the comparison, the Eagles won last week, right, and we're wondering if this team's going to lose out now all of a sudden, right? But for Buffalo, Josh played great. Awesome. He's played great all season long. The defense was abused, start to finish. And now you enter a game with both safeties in Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin on the injury report. Maybe they go. Tells me they're not 100%. And now the Lions, who we know are versatile offensively and can attack you however you'd like, on the ground, through the air, deep, short, intermediate areas of the field, it makes for a very difficult challenge here. I think, Donnie, you also just kind of mentioned the spot. I think the Lions are in a significantly better spot, having last played on a Thursday, right? This is a team that also played on a Thursday, but not on a short week, right? It was a Thursday-to-Thursday situation. Now on a mini-bye here, compared to a Buffalo team who was out in L.A. last week. I find the Lions to be, again, in a significantly better spot. And I'll add this as well. Look, sometimes we see teams where, okay, eventually your cards are going to get pulled. It's not going to work your direction. We talk about Kansas City all the time. But I've laid points with the Chiefs this year once. It was laying 2.5 at home against Baltimore because, if you can, DRS, get to a spot where you lay under a field goal with one of the best teams in the league at home, it's hard to pass up.
It is hard to pass up. And also that's why we're trying to level, because some outlets actually are showing a -2 at this point here from Detroit. So you're saying, do they know something we don't? Because you are coming in significantly in a better spot, as Kevin pointed out, and rightfully so, because, yes, traveling out to the West Coast and using a lot of energy and losing that game, and I continue to bring up this point. It wasn't as if Buffalo went out there and lost 14-13. It's like, oh, Josh Allen threw a late interception. They correct that. They'll be back into it. There was so many leaks in that secondary. Now, we're not saying they can be as effective as Matthew Stafford was at that spot. But we're talking about Jared Goff has had the ability to throw touchdown passes, a running game that should keep everything balanced, and also a secondary that you just don't get torched last week that's going to get pressured from guys like Jamison Williamson and also coming through there with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, and that's why I think the rushing attack is critical for Buffalo. Because of the defensive inefficiencies, you want to stay on the football field as long as possible to give your defense a break, right? That's why we're seeing the 54.5s as well. I mean, Detroit puts up 34 in the win over Green Bay, and we saw 42 points out of Buffalo, and we also saw their defense give up 44 to Matt Stafford. That's why you're seeing such a high total. I lean to the under in terms of the matchup, but again, if Buffalo is going to win this game, they're going to have to run the football. They're going to have to get in the area of about 130, 140 yards per game, and Kev, to be honest, can't be all Josh Allen. It has to be those running backs.
But let me also just say this. You talk about the way some of the bets are coming in on Buffalo, and I don't want to say that a respected gambler or smart gambler can't be betting Buffalo, but this is now been going on for almost 5 years. Because here we are again. They are the most liked team in this league. Kansas City's popular. A lot of people hate Kansas City, right? Philadelphia can be divisive. Detroit can be divisive. This has been going on for half a decade. People adore Josh Allen. They want to bet Josh Allen. They desperately want him to be better than Mahomes, so they keep showing up and betting these numbers. So much so that at one point last week, Buffalo was favored to win the AFC. We'll talk about that next. I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a shout. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Back right here on Pro Football Today. We're taking a look at the game between Detroit and Buffalo, and this very well could be a Super Bowl preview. If you look at the Super Bowl odds, these are two of the top four choices on the board. Though, just a week ago, these were two of the top two choices on the board. The Bills' loss did bang them up in the futures market, down to plus 650 to win the Super Bowl, and no longer the AFC outright favorites. And that, to me, was... Look, I've been as harsh as I think anybody on what Kansas City's been this year, but the Chiefs' pathway to the 1 seed was still much clearer than that of Buffalo's, while I felt holding a little bit of an easier schedule, and yet they were still showing Buffalo, Lisi, as the favorite in the AFC. What are you making of the Super Bowl market and the way those odds are continuing to move?
Well, I still would put the Chiefs ahead of Buffalo right now, and it had nothing to do in terms of, Buffalo's loss on the road. But again, you're talking about a team that has been there, done that in the Kansas City Chiefs. Until they get knocked off in a playoff type of situation, I know the 15 games of one score, they've won all 15 of them over the past couple of seasons. They're just a battle-tested group, and they step up when the game's on the line, and they have the best quarterback in all the NFL, no matter what. When the game and the chips are in the middle of the table, whether it be the regular season or the playoffs, Donnie, you want Pat Mahomes under center. So until that changes, can't put Buffalo right now ahead of Kansas City. But again, we'll see how these games play out. There's a lot of sharp people today that have picked the Cleveland Browns to upset Kansas City. They haven't looked good. It's a 4.5-point number. Jameis, can put up some points. You never know. It's bad weather. We'll see how this game plays out.
Sharps are back there again on Cleveland. Should be fun. But in the AFC, you take a look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens. Any one of those teams, for me, can beat the Kansas City Chiefs. But you know what the issue is going to be? They're not going to be favored to beat the Kansas City Chiefs when the Kansas City Chiefs have home field advantage throughout the playoffs and a first-week bye. That's why we still look at the Chiefs and say a 5-1 price to win the Super Bowl does still make sense. And again, I'm not saying they're the most talented team, but also, Joe, you point out, they have Patrick Mahomes, they have Andy Reid, they will be home. They probably now will be in the Super Bowl, even though if you put teams on neutral sites here, I still would say, yeah, Ravens, Steelers, and again, the Bills have an equal chance to beat them, but they won't be favored to do so.
Yeah, I actually think, so kind of, if you will, Buffalo was ladder one of not disrespect, but I think maybe too much movement from the books last week, and that's now been corrected due to a Buffalo loss. It is not that Buffalo cannot beat Kansas City. It's, I guess, more so like if I were in charge of a book, I am not going to give you a better price on KC than I need to. I now think the second would be the gap between Detroit and Kansas City. And look, the Chiefs are putting out one of the most fraudulent resumes we have ever seen. Every single game is a one-score victory. They cannot extend on anyone. The offense, here's something no one talks about. The offense has been garbage since Eric Bieniemy left. Figure that out. Nobody wants to talk about. I promise you don't want to have that conversation.
No. Washington, UCLA, garbage.
But Mahomes has been his absolute worst without Bieniemy. I mean, if you would like to have the conversation, we can.
Why not?
What are we talking about? Bieniemy is nowhere near the issue nor the reason for this.
So they were the best offense in football.
Yes,
he
when
left, and now
Kelsey
they have
was the best tight end of all time.
Wait a second, they also had Tyreek
They had wide
Hill.
receivers. They have no wide receivers now.
Tyreek.
They have revolving door.
But I'm
at
saying the
offensive line.
transition you had. I mean,
They have
we
Mahomes.
talked. Yes.
And everything
and
else
like
worse.
garbage wide receivers that just
Everything is worse.
journeyman wide
worse.
receivers.
Every year it gets worse for Kansas City at skill position, and they still win.
Again, I think that's just an interesting way to position Pat Mahomes, though, right? I'm just saying because their offense has been middling for 2 consecutive seasons in the regular season now. That's what it's been.
You see, when we talk about greatness and you talk about elite quarterbacks, Pat Mahomes has separated himself from everybody else. Statistically, in the regular season is one thing. The playoffs are completely a different animal, and he has done that. And again, Brady had up and down years. Granted, it's not as bad as what we're seeing from an interception to touchdown ratio in that perspective. But again, even Peyton Manning, they get judged at the by winning games, especially in the postseason. I mean, I'm not saying that it's Bieniemy. I would not say it's Bieniemy in terms of initially. That first year, yes, but now after watching it play out, it's not all Bieniemy.
I'm sure Matt Nagy will somehow get another head coaching job off of this.
Doing a good job calling plays.
If
Nagy's calling plays.
Oh, so maybe then that's the problem. Then maybe Andy should go back to calling plays. A team certainly, though, within this Super Bowl conversation is the Philadelphia Eagles. The Steelers still not as much. Maybe a road victory today would change that song a little bit. We'll break it down next right here on SportsGrid. I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a chance. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on. I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no!
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the book.
Back with you right here on Sports Grid. We make the move to Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, a battle of Pennsylvania, and one that has seen the Pittsburgh Steelers make this trip to Philly with little to no success. It has been, I think, over 5 decades, 6 decades.
Yeah, 65 was the last time I think they got a win.
It's been a long time since they won in Philadelphia, Lisi. There's a lot of different ways we can get into this game, but just on its surface level, where are you finding some value within this matchup?
Well, let's look at, you talk about Philadelphia. They have won 9 straight games. They're 5-1 at home, but they've only had 4 true home games up until this point, Kev. So you break down the margin of victory. They've won those 4 games by an average margin of 5.7 points per game, right? And what's the spread today? 5.5. So they're right on the number. But I still think Philadelphia, to me, is the more complete offense and defense heading into this matchup. It's not to take away from Russell Wilson and Pittsburgh. They've won 7 of the last 8. They've won the last 2 by an average margin of victory over Cleveland and Cincinnati by 9.5 points per game. They won 27-14. Russell Wilson really effective for much of the game, but it was the rushing attack with Najee Harris that took over. He's going to have to be great today, I believe, Russ Wilson, to pull this game out. I think they can run it potentially with Saquon Barkley. I'm talking about the Eagles, work off a play action, and I do feel that they win this ball game by at least double digits. I think a 10-point or more victory by the Eagles later today, but I do feel points in this matchup.
Certainly will be decisive if that's the case. We take a look at the weather reports. Not bad, but it is cooler temperatures, a little bit of wind blowing around, no precipitation, which makes for a great football game. If we look at Pro Football Focus, the number 1 and number 2 defense in the NFL, it's the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And by the way, the Eagles, very good against the run and very good against the pass. The one leaky part of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Joe, is that secondary, which lines up once again with what can Jalen Hurts do today with his 2 top wide receivers, and can they make those moves downfield? Because conversely, on the other side, you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, I really like what Russell Wilson is doing, but also like what Russell Wilson does with George Pickens, who's not available today, which, Joe, then we say, can Mike Williams make an impact down the field? He really hasn't done so yet. We see him getting a little bit more and more involved on a week-to-week basis, but I think you're right. For me, for a betting philosophy, if you like the Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't know if it's necessarily, just take a look at Russell Wilson, but it's Najee Harris in the backfield along with Jaylen Warren. Can they get enough, like 4.5 yards to 5 yards per carry, to keep the chains moving? Because for me, Joe, it's just a simple handicap. I think the Eagles will be able to move the football at an easier clip. I'm not saying they're going to go up and down on the Steelers, but an easier clip, Joe, than the Steelers will against the Eagles defense.
Could be a 3-point game heading into the fourth quarter, and they could tack one on and they cover the number. I think it'll be a competitive game, obviously, and Pittsburgh will be in it. But in the end, I just think Philly's built a little bit better and more and stronger in terms of the interior lines. I think they pull it out with Hurts and Barkley.
I'm still not a huge believer on Pittsburgh at this level. And that's both sides of the ball, quite frankly. So the defense, to me, I'm willing to challenge with an Eagles team total. That number, 23.5, minus 125 juice, but I think it's worth it to get to 24+, where Philly, last game landed 22. That was the first time in 7 games that they had not scored over 23.5 points. And if you look at Pittsburgh, they've allowed 4 of their last 5 road opponents now to score 24+ points. I think it's a nice way to back the Eagles' offense overall and leave the narratives of it all alone instead of figuring out, okay, Barkley anytime because they got to get the MVP cooking, or, Hurts anytime because they're going to get to the 1-yard line, or, let me get AJ anytime because otherwise he's going to quit the team, or, Devontae anytime because that's the zag of all zags. Give me 24 points and let's move on. But to hyper-focus on the A.J. Brown element of this, again, the poor A.J., 81.5 is his prop. Man, they must not be using this guy a lot. 5.5 receptions is his prop. I mean, my, oh my, no wonder this is a real problem that A.J. Brown is having here. I mean, Donnie, are you just lining up the A.J. narrative specials here today and flying through numbers?
Look, I like that, the way it sets up, because you understand this. He's not just an average wideout. Like right now, you might be able to say Deebo Samuel's below average and he's squawking, and they still try to get him the football. If you want harmony in the locker room and it makes some sense, he will get his plays. I don't necessarily have to force the football because there's way too many talented athletes on the Eagles to do that. You will get your setups here. You will get your play calls here. And sometimes it just might be so simple that A.J. Brown in the red zone goes, you know what, on this play, just look for me. It's one-on-one coverage. Even if I don't have the man beat, throw it to me. I'll make the catch. It's what I do as a top-level wideout. But there is something to be said about buying into. You want harmony on a football team. And if you're a good quarterback, You understand how we have to do, Joe. Sit down with the wide receiver. Here's what we're doing. I understand you're going to get the football. You're going to be open. I'll get it to you. I just can't force it to you and say, you know what? Devontae's wide open. Calcaterra's wide open. We could run it to Saquon. You want me to audible that play on the 3-yard line to a slant pass that might not be there when I hand it off to Saquon and we get a touchdown. You are playing with a little bit of fire, but the fire is easy to play with when you win 9 straight football games, look to make it 10 in a row. But if you said today, Donnie, what do you think AJ is going to do today? Boy, I'll stake my claim on that touchdown today.
Yeah, he might score a touchdown today. I mean, I still think they go with the bread and butter in terms of how and their offensive identity. And to me, Kev, it's Saquon Barkley in the rushing attack. Again, to Donnie's point, I think AJ will eat, the wide receivers will eat. But again, I still think they'll look to run the football with Saquon. I mean, he's been a dominant force in terms of this team. He has elevated them to potentially one of the best records in the NFL. And again, that is their identity. When Saquon runs the football effectively, they win games, and certainly when he's over 100. Look at what they did when they were on the road against Baltimore.
Again, I can't. The conversation we are having sounds
ridiculous.
like we are talking about the Eagles off of a loss.
Yeah. But what happens if they do? You see, I don't want to talk about that, but what happens if they do lose?
Yeah.
Does the locker room now they have to answer all these questions?
Well, it depends on how it happens.
Yeah, they lose. They lose and they throw for $125. So that's trouble. If they win, throwing for $125, I just think it's another one of those background arguments shouldn't happen.
But
it is a tough defense, though, they're playing today. Like, if you say get going, like you should have been getting going in the passing game against Carolina, and you didn't last week.
But here's the thing, right? So you have a head coach who has been obviously under a microscope throughout the season, Donnie.
Yeah.
So you tell me, if you're Sirianni, what's the MO today? Get AJ the ball or win the game?
Based on today, as I said, if they throw for 125 yards, AJ has 3 catches for 36 yards, Kevin, I don't actually think there's a big deal in the locker room because of the stakes of the game today, where locker rooms get upset, where teams are supposed to blow out, because anybody's been an athlete, played at any level, any sport. You're a baseball player. You face a pitcher that's throwing 55 miles an hour. You go up there and go 0 for 4. You're angry. Your team won 9-1. You have a basketball game where the other team doesn't defend you at the three-point line. You bomb away. You went 1 of 6. Everybody else had fun. You're upset about it. But if you play a team that's a state championship level team and you win 3-2 in football, nobody's upset by that because the win is more important than the numbers itself.
The thing, though, is, because, again, before last week, we had joked, Donnie, that they had been prodding AJ at the end of all these games.
Yeah.
Hey, how do you feel about your targets so far? Hey, everything good here? And he kept laughing it off.
Yeah.
And then he broke last game. And, again, they were prodding him because he has already let people know that he will, in a playoff game, lose his mind if he's not pleased with his workload. Mm-hmm. So they knew it. So, Donnie, they win today.
Yes.
35-14. He finishes with 2 grabs.
Yeah, he's going to be an issue.
They're gonna prod him. And
there will be.
But it is up to him. I will say this. While AJ's comments, again, bothered me to no end of it, Brandon Graham, with him, I watched that. I'm telling you, I watched the video, Donnie went, man, the AI is getting scary. Like, I cannot believe that is a real video of Brandon Graham being like, yeah, AJ's been a pain. Hurts has got to play better. They kind of hate one another now.
They used to love each other. Now there's a lot of hate in the locker room. And then they have other people saying, well, that's a good thing. Like, hate in the locker room makes you play better and gets everybody. Nobody does. You know how you handle that? First drive down there, 7-yard slant pass, touchdown. He spikes the football. All the joy in the world. But this has a chance. It does have a chance to be a powder keg, but it's so funny talking about a powder keg where it's like they've lost 9 in a row. They're one of the most, like the Jets, right? Like, what's going on? They're so talented they lose. The Eagles just keep winning here. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it is. And if they lose today, the fans, I'm sure, will be upset about Hurts. 197.5 is his total today.
But by the way, like if the game opens up where they run it 3 straight times to Saquon for -1 yards, you won't hear anything from the crowd. They open up and go 3 straight incomplete passes and punt, raining down boos, fire the coach. I can't believe what we're doing here.
People were legitimately ready to jump the field because they kept throwing unnecessarily. They adjusted, but apparently nobody explained what was going on to A.J. Brown. A lot more to break down with you right here on SportsGrid. I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a chance. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set, to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that,
I
Kenny?
would never stiff anybody. What he texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Here on Pro Football Today, we're going to talk Dolphins-Texans. I do want to just very quickly give the Steelers a little bit more acknowledgement in that game. Look, the Eagles have created this situation that the quarterback wide receiver thing is the talking point of the game. Pittsburgh's a 10-3 football team that some, like myself, are still hesitant to buy in on. Lisi, final 4 games. At Philly, at Baltimore, home against Kansas City, home against Cincinnati. Every question likely will be answered in the final month of football.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll see if Russell Wilson is the quarterback that could take them to the next level, right? I mean, I think people forget this was a playoff team with Mason Rudolph last year, and as an 11.5-point dog, they played fairly well against Buffalo, were within striking distance. So now can Russ Wilson elevate this team? The biggest takeaway in terms of the victory last week over Cleveland for me was how the defense got off the field on third down. They held Cleveland to 2 of 13 in terms of third down conversions. I'm not suggesting they need that type of effort today, but at least we're right in the area, Donnie, of 30% for Jalen Hurts. You give your offense an opportunity, but to your point, I do feel the rushing attack is critical. They're going to have to challenge on play action. We'll see if Russ can do it. I know you've bought in all year. This is his opportunity now on the road.
It is, and also it will be on his shoulders, as we said. Like, he's not getting a lot of help at wide receiver. Hey, he's got Freiermuth out there and Mike Williams and Calvin Austin III, whoever is going to be running routes for him. That's not the case here. I just think it's a ground game, Joe. And if you said, what's going to be the key to the football game? Give me the team that rushes for more yards, because the one thing we think we can be aggressive with is Jalen Hurts probably going to outrush Russell Wilson in this game. Now it's up to those two running backs for the Pittsburgh Steelers to sort of counter Saquon Barkley. I'm not so sure they can do that, because on one side, I do think the Philadelphia Eagles can hone in on that run game, because the Eagles' secondary has been spectacular. I don't think you could do the same thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it is going to be up to that defensive line and linebackers finally healthy for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They'll pressure Jalen Hurts, which could mean, Kevin, more rushing yards for Jalen Hurts. Battle the quarterbacks, battle the running backs. I'm expecting a very, very good day. But if I said, Donnie, who's going to win the game, I do think it's the Eagles, and I think there's a legitimate chance they're going to win by a touchdown or more when it's all said and done.
Let's get to another good quarterback matchup, though, and that's C.J. Stroud against Tua Tagovailoa. I think truly for Tua, perception-wise, this has been his best year as a pro. It would be, I think, close to consensus now that if Tua did not get injured, this would be a playoff team in Miami, just considering what the record is and was not when Tua was gone and who the opponents were. Certainly a lot of winnable games that were dropped. But for Miami, the door is not closed. They have a stretch of schedule here that I think preseason presented a lot more difficult than it actually is now supposed to be. At Houston, right? Well, oh, wow, Texans division favorites. You can tell this number in spots under a field goal. Next week, they'll host the Niners. They'll be booked as favorites in that game. They're going to close at the Jets. They'll be booked as favorites in that game. Those are two spots that preseason they were likely looking to catch points. But, Lisi, it is likely all for naught if they cannot pull off a small upset here today on the Texans. I think this Miami team may need to win out in order to crash the AFC playoffs here, which means they need it today.
Yeah, they do need it, and look at what they did last week. Again, they trailed for much of that game against the New York Jets. They pull it out 32-26. We saw Tyreek Hill finally get involved consistently in terms of the offense, 115 yards and a touchdown, 2 throws for 331. But I'll say this, Kevin, in order for Miami to win this game on the road in Houston against an above-average defense, a defensive-minded head coach, and an offense that loves to run the football with Joe Mixon, they're going to have to run the football effectively, and that is the concern I have with Miami. Big picture, that is the concern, and it has always been, Donnie, the weakness of why Miami can't win on the road against better teams and can't win in the playoffs. And I don't think it changes today. They might put up points, and this game might sail through the total, but in the end, I'm laying it with C.J. Stroud. They're 4-2 at home. I think that they have the better rushing attack, and their defense is much better, especially in the front seven. I'm laying it with Houston.
Yeah, some of the games we've talked about are interesting, too, because, again, it does raise an eyebrow. Why are we only looking at 2.5 points here as a favorite for Houston at home against Miami? And also, if you take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles, tickets going in the opposite direction toward the Steelers. If we even talked about the Detroit game at -2.5 at home, -2, tickets going in the opposite direction for the Bills. You're getting that same feel today from the Miami game. If we look at the MO of teams, you can't line up and play the Kansas City Chiefs and the Eagles every week. We get that. But we saw them on Monday Night Football primetime right on this desk actually surprise and go on the road and win a game against the Los Angeles Rams, which I thought the Rams would beat them. But after that, they beat the Raiders, who stink. They beat New England, who stinks. They lost by double digits on the road to Green Bay, who's a good football team. And last week against the Jets, who are dead and buried and stink, they were on the ropes in that game. And quite frankly, a couple miracles at the end of the game, which gave the Dolphins the win. How long can you outlast that? Now, understand, the concept of C.J. Stroud is a very good quarterback. 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions this year. It hasn't been good enough. But I look at that, Joe, and I keep it simple. Houston's at home, rested and ready here, need this game just as much as the Dolphins to try to stay in that race in their division and also try to get better seeding. I'll lay the 2.5 points today, Kevin.
Yeah, I think, look, you can get threes out there as well. I was tempted by Miami catching the field goal. I think if it was 3.5, I would have had no choice but to play Miami at that number there. But I don't blame you one bit, DRS. I think what's tough for Houston, this is the second season now in a row of this where every week you pick your head up and you're like, who they lose this week? Like it's just nonstop.
Yes.
The injury bug. Jalen Petrie now heads to the IR, who's been very strong for them within their secondary. And I think that's one of the odd spots where we get this Houston team, Donnie, and you look at the recent sample, size for it's very tough to gauge, right? Yeah, that Thursday nighter against the Jets, where I know you were all over, a good spot for the Jets.
Yeah.
The Jets get it done. Good spot or not, you look back and you're like, man, you should not be losing to the Jets if you're a really good team. They played the Detroit Lions, and it's like, yes, they should have beat Detroit. But if you lose a game where the opposing quarterback throws 5 interceptions, I don't like that from you, right? They smashed Dallas. Okay, cool. We got it. That's great. They lose to the Tennessee Titans. They barely beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? In a game where they took out Trevor Lawrence within that football game. The Houston results, we spend a lot of time critiquing, and I think rightfully, Kansas City because of who they are. The Texans we don't spend as much time on, but because it would be surprising if we don't break down a Texans playoff game, we're going to look at those results, Donnie, and go, this isn't a very good football team. That's what we're getting from them, at least.
No, you are getting that right now, and it is up to C.J. Stroud because we got so spoiled last year with the game he can play that you expected on a year-to-year basis. A little bit down, but still winning football games, which is good. And you're right. If I'm betting the Dolphins today, and he said, Donnie, give me one prop, it's got to be on Tyreek Hill on the outside. If he doesn't explode today against those weak safeties as Kevin talks injured, I don't think they can do well.
All right, coming up next, we're going to get to your Sports Millions pick'ems with the Broncos and Colts in focus.
sharpest football contest show in the land. The Las Vegas Football Contest Show focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With two former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
Uncle Stevie can just walk up the aisle like he's at the supermarket. I'll get a starting pitcher here, I'll get a closer here, I'll get a first baseman here, and he'll just keep throwing things in the cart because there is no limit.
Now he's gone, so they got to go get arms to make that team better. Because the bottom line was they were just outclassed by the Dodgers. Let's face it, they got their ass beat.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a challenge. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word. Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Live with you right here on SportsGrid. Kevin Walsh with you on Pro Football Today. And it is time for our Sports Millions Pick'em, where we try and find some value, some possibilities where we could go higher or lower, all depending on what seems to fit the eye. We look at this game between the Denver Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts, and I'd be remiss if I didn't just acknowledge the stakes of this football game here today. In the AFC playoff picture, you kind of have to make a sacrifice if you're a team who's hoping to break the glass here, like a Miami, like a Cincinnati, because you need both of these teams to lose between Denver and Indianapolis. But I think you're rooting on a Colts upset in this one. You are hoping that the Colts can find a way, even if it puts them at 7-7, to hold Denver down from that possible 9-5 record. It's a tough back stretch there for the Broncos, so the potential where this upset makes the difference, and all of a sudden, a Denver team who could possibly be an underdog in their final 3 games of the season, it works out very nicely. One thing I think you'll see some success for today on the Indianapolis side is their kicking game. Their kicker, Matt Gay, has had a very good season so far, making 88% of his kicks. Last week, though, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, they're coming off their bye, didn't have as many opportunities. So if you take a look, Matt Gay last week finishes 1 for 1. It was the first time in a long time where he did not have higher than 1.5 field goals made going to Denver, altitude, which can always be a kicker's friend. And I think that's one of my favorite options today over on Sports Millions. You're talking about a kicker who 8-9 games in a row of over or higher 1.5 field goals made. And I think that's one of your better options here for Indianapolis. Expect certainly Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor to get going here. I think we could very well see a lower scoring game than anticipated right now between the Colts and the Broncos here. While both teams are coming off of the bye, we may see a little bit more in the way of the defenses being able to rebound. I think we've seen an up and down flow so far for the defenses here between both Indianapolis and Denver. But I think that today that can keep this a little lower scoring. And it then may put some of the onus on Denver's rookie quarterback, Bo Nix, to attack in different ways. Bo Nix started the season where he was excellent running the football. It was one of his better weapons, and it was keeping defenses off balance. You look at his first 3 games of his career, 5 for 35, 4 for 25, and 9 for 47. He had multiple rushing touchdowns in those 3-game windows. But if you now look at his last 4 games, 3 for -5, 2 for 5, 1 for 5, 3 for 4. No volume, no workload, and it has caused an adjustment. Maybe the lowest number we've seen so far for Bo Nix on the ground today here on Sports Millions Pick'em, it's 15.5. And I think you go higher than that number. While I know Bo Nix has not been able to get over that number in his last 4 games combined, I think this is a nice chance to buy low against an Indianapolis defense who has struggled against mobile quarterbacks all season long. You look at their last game against Drake May, who went for 50-plus on the ground. Josh Allen went well over the 50-yard marker. Justin Fields went over the 50-yard marker against his Colts. They've actually had a few more run-ins, I feel, than most teams typically do with mobile quarterbacks. Even when they played Green Bay, it was one of the games that Jordan Love had missed, and we saw that end up being Malik Willis, who ran for 40-plus in that game. So I think today you go Bo Nix higher, 15.5 rushing yards on Sports Millions Pick'em. Just to once again reset our 2 picks here today in the game between the Denver Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts. We're going to go Matt Gay higher, 1.5 field goals made in a nice, lovely bounce-back spot where the environment should be a kicker's best friend. And then Bo Nix higher, 15.5 rushing yards to get back to the ground game that made him very dangerous in multiple capacities to get his rookie season underway. Do not forget to head over to Sports Millions Pick'em's countless options for you on this NFL Sunday. We'll be right back here on SportsGrid.